And so that's why I developed the Seek First method, is once I was able to see what the root core issue was, then my purpose of bringing true health and wellness to people in a lasting way was the only thing I could focus on. Seek First podcast. It's Viking season. Coach Dan sitting here with Tim, Minnesota Tim, Parochka.
Yeah.
Parochka. I always put an O in it. Parochka.
There is no O in it.
And Tim and my, there is an O. I always owe it too much. But Tim and I's journey as friends, as brothers in Christ, as co-fans of the Minnesota Vikings, as mentors to my children, started, years ago, and it's just pretty cool how it interwove itself slowly over time.
Yeah, for sure.
I met Tim officially first in our men's group on Thursday, which still meets to this day. This was before you were married, before kids. I mean, BC, right? Before children, before COVID. So anyway, I'm just really happy to have him here. Tim, you tell us, a little bit about you. Obviously, I'm wearing an old Teddy Bridgewater jersey because it's Viking season, and you're kind of the new voice of the Vikings. Certainly for me you are.
Thank you. That's very nice of you.
And for thousands of people.
Yeah, I got some subscribers. There's some subscribers on there.
So
what do you want to know?
Well, how did you get into that in particular? How did you fall into that Paul Allen mode, kind of niche?
Yeah, a long time ago, during college actually, is when the first process began for me. I was going to graduate in like 3.5 years with a sociology major, and the problem with that was I didn't know what sociology was. It's a lot of BS, and it's a lot of kind of like, okay, theory this, theory that, not a whole lot of fact-based stuff. But I was really good at it. I was good at making crap up, and the teachers liked me, and I got A+, and I led the classroom, and I was like, this feels good. This is the first time in my life where I've got the top grade in the class. So I'm like, I guess I'll graduate with a sociology degree then. But it's like, my mom is actually the one that held me accountable to that. It's like, Tim, great that you want to graduate with a sociology degree. What do you want to do after that? And I didn't have an answer for her. So I really had to do some soul searching on okay, what is it that you have a passion for? What is it that you want to do? You get one life, you get one chance. Not that you can't switch careers or whatever, but you get one path through college, and you got to make it count. And you're paying money here too. And I think when I did that soul searching, I discovered that I had a passion for radio broadcasting, and I had it for quite a few years, but it's a very intimidating career field because there's a lot of connections, there's a lot of grind, there's a lot of people that don't make it, there's a lot of people that fail. But that was the passion that I had since high school, and I was like, you know what? So St. Cloud State, where I graduated college, has a great career program in radio broadcasting, and that's what I'm going to pursue. So it was really a discovery that I had in that moment that I'm not the only one that struggles with this. There's a lot of people that go through college, say they graduated, and aren't even following the pathway of their own career choice, yet have 20, 30, 40, 50,000 plus in college debt. And I was almost that person, except for my mom held me accountable and said, Tim, what is it that you want to do? So then got a job right out of college at a radio station in St. Cloud, worked in the sales department. Long story there. Dead-end job. Asked for a sports show 3 times. They denied me 3 times. I threatened to quit my job. And there was a radio station in Pelican Rapids, a couple hours away. They wanted to hire me, and I said, I'm going to leave this sales position that nobody else wanted and take this radio job if you don't give me a free show that I'll do for free, that I'll produce for free, that I'll do everything for free on a Saturday morning from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock. They gave it to me right away. Got some big guests on, like Ernie Johnson from TNT, Kevin Harlan, Torrey Hunter, former Twins. Paul Allen was on several times. Chuck Knobloch, former Minnesota Twin. Had a big array of guests, and my idea was that I'm going to pitch these guests to another radio station so that I can make this a career choice. So build up my resume, did that for about 11 months. SiriusXM in Washington, D.C. wanted to hire me for a part-time job for their PGA Tour radio station. So I accepted it, went out there, worked part-time there, worked full-time at Jimmy John's, taking delivery sandwiches for 2.5 years, got about 10,000 deliveries on my bike. Oof. And then got full-time at SiriusXM 2.5 years later. And then one of the SiriusXM hosts got fired, and iHeartRadio picked him up. He wanted to bring me with him. iHeartRadio allowed me to move wherever I wanted to. So after 3 years at Sirius, only 6 months full time, I moved back to Minnesota.
Okay.
So, and then have worked in the podcast division since 2019 for iHeartMedia, and kind of pursued my own podcast. Did that too.
Well, and when I met you, I think the first I heard about your Vikings passion, because I had known, and I think even before that, I had discovered you also had a passion for ministry, particularly youth ministry. I can't remember which came first, me finding out about your Vikings podcast or you getting this youth ministry position at Transform, which is now proudly our church as well. But prior to YouTube, which is the forum that I prefer and pretty much live on, which is why I've been able to not only listen to you more frequently, but really find what I think I truly enjoy about you in particular. Because there's lots of people who talk about the Vikings, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I could tune into K-Fan tomorrow morning and listen to each show, which I did for years on my commutes and things like that. But, you know, there are a few things that I really, truly enjoy, some of them personal, some of them just appealing, that I think are, you know, maybe things you already know, which we can discuss, but have broad scale appeal that I found myself like actually really wanting to listen, not just, hey, I love this guy, he's my friend, I want to support the podcast, what's not to like about the Vikings, you know, but then to actually watch it a few times enough to be like, you know, I really enjoy these, and now I'm, you know, I'm pretty much listening to each one of your clips every day. You know, it helps that the Vikings are 3-0,
well,
dominating
nice.
Super Bowl contenders, you know, playing out of their brain, But so like, but you had a podcast prior to coming onto YouTube. Is YouTube relatively?
Yeah, I started the YouTube last October, very small thing, and didn't have a camera, just used my computer. The background looked terrible. And it just kind of has morphed into something that I invested into. And now I'm posting on YouTube twice, 3 times a day, except for 1 day a week. I really value having that one off day, that Sabbath. And during the off season, it was the Sunday. And this really just kind of took place a few months ago when I started posting daily to YouTube. I'm like, you know what? There's going to be a day that I don't post. There's going to be a day that I don't record. There's going to be a day that is just a free day, a mental, physical rest day. And it's funny how, you know, the Bible talks about that from the very beginning of Scripture. And
it might be important.
Right, it might be. It's almost like he's giving us a warning. And then you look at research, and all of a sudden, research suggests that you should take a day off of work during the week. Like this is some brand new information.
You're actually more productive.
So now I take off Saturdays just with the games on Sunday. You know, you want to react and get some pods up quickly. So I've kind of changed that from a Sunday to Saturday. But the YouTube is relatively new, and even the Minnesota Vikings focus is relatively new. The podcast started several years ago, just like via SoundCloud or whatever, and it was just kind of like a random podcast, just talked about whatever, whatever was newsworthy, whether it was Vikings, Timberwolves, National, whatever, Tom Brady retiring, whatever. And then it kind of transformed into a Vikings and Timberwolves podcast, but then you do studies on podcasts, and it's like, you've got to be niche.
Really
you've got to
niche.
be really, like, focus in on one particular subject. And sometimes you have to be, like, a subject within the subject.
Yeah,
so, like,
sub-niche.
Right. There's people that go like, oh, I have a Minnesota Vikings podcast, but I'm just talking about the quarterbacks or whatever it is that they talk about. So it's really morphed into a niche Minnesota Vikings. They're the most popular team in Minnesota, and even though the NFL plays the shortest amount of games, they control the schedule 365 days a year.
They sure do.
Christmas used to be NBA. Now it's not even NBA anymore. It's NFL because they've stolen that window, and the NFL is just in charge everywhere. So,
they've mastered that.
right, and that's why I've taken my podcast that direction. I love the Timberwolves. I like the Vikings.
And that was a wonderful season too last year.
Right, and I love the Vikings, but like, if I'm going to talk about one, I'm going to talk about one that maximizes the media attention, and that's the way I decided to go.
The sub-niche thing is so cool, and it almost feels like a part of God's revelatory, kind of nature, right? He's always shrouded. He's always kind of, and for me personally, I find myself in the exact same position. It's like I've been a restaurant owner, I've been multiple business owners, been dad, been a gym owner, been a trainer, and then most recently been obsessed with understanding spiritual health as it relates to human psychology, human behavior, and being able to layer that on top of everything. I find myself in this extremely rare health niche where I truly feel like I'm one of the only people who truly understand what true health is and where it starts from. I can go on Facebook right now, scroll through social media and see ad after ad after ad after ad for personal training, nutrition, blah, 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 right? It's just like sports. It's probably one of the most competitive industries in the world.
Right.
And what I don't see is a whole bunch of people who understand that nutrition and health and nutrition and working out. Well, great. And I take part in them. I have apps. I have trainers. They're symptomatic. And it took me a while to realize, like, we're treating the symptoms here. We're not treating the root cause of the reason why you're not healthy, why you're taking these behaviors, why you're not doing these things. And so as I discovered that, it just took me deeper into what the actual core problem is. How do we treat from the inside out? I have all the I have the supplements, I have the holistic clinicians, I have the hormone and blood testing, I have the exercise facility and the diet planning. We have all that. So why, when you do all that, do you put it back on? Right? Because it's a symptom. It's a symptom of the way you view the world. It's a symptom of the struggles in your life that are out of your control. It's a symptom of the wrong focus on the wrong things for the wrong reasons. And so rebuilding that foundational spiritual psychological foundation of the right way to view things through the world, which will provide a healthier outlook in relationship to your physical health and stuff. And it's like, dude, I truly feel like the only person doing that right now.
Well, where does that begin? Because you can take that from so many different ways. Like
you can.
So you're going from the spiritual to like the outside, and to the psychological as well.
Which I would say those intersect quite significantly. Like really significantly. The spiritual comes before the psychological, in the sense that, in order to understand how our mind works and how this plays out in behavior, we have to back it up even further into the fact that we are thought-driven machines, and where do those thoughts come from?
Right.
And if you view them as your own, like you're some thought-generating machine that sits around and comes up with these incredible revelatory, fully formed thoughts just out of the blue because that's who you are, you have a foundational issue right at that point, because that's not how it happens. You can be given a thought and then you can start the analysis process, and that's, you know, that's a human capacity. Like, is that right? You know, you can ask questions, you can hold it up, you can inspect it, but the thoughts that are given to us are a direct reflection of where we're looking and how we're looking in life. And so that's a spiritual framework at its best. That's, you know, are you looking at yourself? Well, that's a spiritual dilemma right at its core, right? Because that goes all the way back to Adam and Eve. It's like, you notice anything else in the world looking at itself? It's like there's nothing else looking at itself. It's all a part of this grand, amazing, flowing reality. And yet we are the only things that seem to be self-aware, and that self-awareness creates emotional debilitation, anxiety, depression, worry, angst, some for good reasons, mostly for not. And, you know, that comes right at the split in the story of Adam and Eve. You know, regardless of historical context, conceptualization just within the myth alone, you know, is profound. And it's like, and it's right. I hate to break it to anybody who doesn't understand it. It's right. And so if you don't get that framework right, the human psyche is going to respond. Is going to respond differently. It's going to respond in an egoic, centric lens that views the world as you're the center of, and then everything that's happening is happening to you, and your psyche is going to adapt and modify based on that relationship with reality, versus having an outward lens and caring more about Tim right now than what Tim thinks about me, and being present in this moment and trying to pay attention, you know, almost outside myself. Gives me an opportunity to learn more about you, serve you properly, you know, see things a little clearer, not so clouded, not through the lens that I want to see things through, but through the physical lens. And that, when you combine that with cultural patterns like college, it's like, who in your life told you that after getting a sociology degree would not provide the direct pathway forward to work? It's like, that's 80% of college degrees. And we're taught from a very, very young age that if I get this degree,
you're successful.
I'm here, man. I made it. I'm smart.
And then you get in the real world, and you're just like...
And you start realizing that reality has different predictable patterns that are so true they go beyond argument. For one, there is no place we're trying to get to other than perhaps heaven, right? There is no physical destination in life that isn't anything other than either a gift that's been given to you along the way, which is the proper way of viewing it, or as a trap in your own pursuit of what you think the next step is going to be, that's going to fill that hole of purpose and meaning and longing and direction in your heart. And every time you get to that next direction or that next destination, you're out in the desert again. It's like, what am I? And so you start realizing, like, not only is it egocentric, but it's also culturally driven. Whether it's intentional or not is irrelevant. It's a trap that everyone falls into. And so if you don't align yourself with what reality is, and reality is flowing, right? It's beauty.
It's not inward focused.
It's not inward focused, and there's nowhere you're going to get to. You know, there's nowhere in this physical life that you're going to get to that's going to fill your heart,
Right.
right? And so learning how to flow with it and to understand that your destination, if you want to get profound about it, is wherever you are right now. That's it. And that's the most important place you can possibly be, is right now. And if you don't understand it that way, you're going to miss everything great that life has to have, because you're going to be worried about getting back home. You're going to be worried about uploading the podcast instead of having a loving conversation with Tim.
Totally.
You know, you're going to miss all the beauty, all the richness of life in that moment, and what reality is presenting you as an opportunity that you view as an annoyance or a hurdle or whatever, because you've created your own idea of what has to happen here next. And it's like, yeah, man, that's anxiety in a nutshell right there. So anyway, I didn't mean to get on a soapbox.
No, I'm glad that you did, because you brought up a conversation that has entered my mind a few months ago. Probably not my own thought, though.
Well, I know, right? Yeah, right.
But
it's the right phrasing.
But it is.
It entered my mind.
I totally agree.
Yes.
It's you know, think about spiritual warfare, and who does God call the prince of this world? It's the
tempter,
the evil one, right?
The tempter, the deceiver.
So you think about all the deception that's coming at us. But the thought that I had, you know, you observe sports athletes or head coaches or whatever when they retire or when they go to press conferences, and they always say, you know, my greatest strength is that I was, you know, never content with where I was, or that I was just not happy because I just wanted to strive for more. You know, they asked Tom Brady, what's your favorite Super Bowl? It's the next one.
Right.
And it's thought of as such a profound statement in a good way. You know, he's always set on the next goal. He's always set on this. That sounds like a life full of stress and anxiety and worry and discontentment. And Scripture talks about, you know, to be content is to be good, basically, is what it says.
Is to shatter your plans.
Right. So it's like contentment is godly. Discontentment is ungodly. And everything that the world throws at us is to be discontent, right? You have this many views, you have this much success. Well, that's not enough.
Right.
You need to advance even further. So that's the battle that all of us need to fight on an everyday basis.
Right.
And I feel that too. Trying to post to YouTube multiple times a day throughout the week, besides one day a week. It's like, I can't be content with 5 views, 10 views. I need to be throwing out 2 podcasts or 3 podcasts a day, so that I can get to the point where this is kind of like a well-oiled machine, and people are coming to the podcast, and you're seeing growth, and you're seeing linear, but like, that's not going to be enough either. You know, you get to that point, it's like, well, then I need to get to another step. You get here, and then I need to get up here. And it's just like, the world just fills us with discontentment.
Yes.
Because that's what the evil one wants.
That's right. And there's nothing wrong. I tell this all the time. There's nothing wrong with amazing goals.
Right.
And seeking a proper direction. But if you seek the proper direction in alignment with who you're supposed to be, then the joy of doing the podcast, the joy of posting the podcast, the joy of interacting with the podcast, the joy of getting those viewers as a gift instead of assigning it to your own hard work and self-worth and building it into your identity and building it into your ego, because now again you're setting a trap for yourself. Right? You don't even realize you're setting your own trap, because now what happens? Right? Now what happens when things don't go right for the Minnesota Viking version of Tim?
Right.
And it's so silly in the big scheme of things,
it's so true.
But it's so deceptive and it's so sneaky, and we fall into it all the time. That's why I said this podcast isn't mine. I have no idea what I'm doing with it. What I don't want to do, the only way I know I can screw it up is if I try to make it something I want it to be, versus, you know what? You know, you had a hilarious intro to a video last week where you explained your, toilet paper problem that had me rolling, because one of the things that I think is so appealing to your approach towards the Vikings commentary is the authenticity that you bring to your commentary. And that's one of the reasons why everybody loves you. It's why the reason my kids love you as a mentor at church. It's why I've come to love you as a friend. It's like, you don't apologize for being goofy. You don't apologize for being a big dork, right? And you just let it out there. And now you're telling a story how you're trapped on the toilet and your wife has to come to your aid. So, what did we do? I'm like, immediately God's like, you need to send him some toilet paper. Right? I was like, and I told Sarah, and Breezy told you ahead of time. I was so annoyed with her. I was like, why'd you tell him that? You can't tell him that. But I'm like, so at youth group, I sent Braden with some toilet paper, and then Thursday morning, you came in with the biggest smile, made your day, because you knew we were thinking about you. You knew we were supporting you. We knew you knew like there was love there. At the same time, it had the exact effect that we wanted it to, and it just, and then at that moment I was like, man, the Vikings are 3-0. Tim's crushing it. He's awesome. He's local. The Vikings are topical. He's good on air. Let's have a before you left, I'm like, dude,
I'm game.
Let's talk about the Vikings.
Let's get together.
And it's that makes life so fun, right? It's like, it's not you being a huge Minnesota broadcaster and me going, I know Tim,
Well, I'm not.
Not yet.
Yeah, right.
Not yet. You never know. I mean, you've had PA on many, many times. You guys seem to have an actual relationship to some degree.
A little bit.
Not
much.
No,
but if I text him, he'll respond.
Right.
So
that's something.
That's something, right?
And Paul Allen is as big as they come in the broadcast world for local sports broadcasting. I mean, is there a bigger name in NFL broadcasting at this point?
Right, probably not for video play-by-play.
And there's tons of Minnesota people that don't even listen to the national broadcast. Right? You see them in the stadium all the time.
Totally.
They're plugged into Paul Allen because he's biased, but he's awesome. He's so good, right? And so, you've had on players, you've had on ex-players, you've had on, you've had on some of your friends to have some dialogue back and forth. So, like, what's your take on the Vikings this year overall?
Man.
Like, what are you? First, you have to share your prediction.
Yeah, right. That's where I was going with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to go with that. Well, this offseason, I did share an opinion that said, I think Sam Darnold's going to shock the world this year. I said, you know what? I think he's going to have his best year of his career because he's going to be told two things. You've got to be efficient and you've got to be effective. But then when it came to prediction time, I'm so weary of highlight videos coming from your own team's organization. I'm so weary of organizational speech, I call it. Yeah. Because what you're going to hear from the organization is, oh, this player looks great in camp. This guy looks great, because they're looking through their team with an extreme bias. No one's going to enter their own training camp with oh yeah, we're going to suck this year, right? And the NFL gives such hope to the worst fan bases in the world. It's like, you know what? This is our year. If we could just do this one thing right. And you see it.
And I was going to say, to their defense, you see it every year. There's always a team that's like, what?
Yeah. And I think the right diagnosis of that is that there's parity amongst the bottom playoff teams in the NFL. Even some of the top, there's a different number one seed throughout the year, but there isn't much parity among the Super Bowl teams, right? I can tell you who's likely to win the Super Bowl this year. The 49ers, the Chiefs, maybe the Baltimore Ravens, maybe the Eagles, but it's just really only 5 or 6 teams have a chance to win the Super Bowl. And but my prediction for the Minnesota Vikings this year, with the organizational speech, you look at the schedule, the Niners, the Texans, the Packers are looking good. They're being picked as a Super Bowl favorite. The Lions were one mistake away, one collapse away from reaching the Super Bowl last year. We're in the toughest division in football. Caleb Williams, #1 overall pick to the Bears. It's I'm not going to fall for the organizational hype. 5-12.
Yep.
That's my record for the Minnesota Vikings this year, and they're 3-0.
Yep. And you couldn't be happier.
I'm so happy, but yet I'm still a skeptic.
Yeah.
Not a full skeptic, but like I'm still weary because Sam Darnold has started a season 3-0 before with the Carolina Panthers. Then they lost like 6 or 7 straight games. He got benched and their season went into the toilet. And they didn't have any toilet paper there to rescue him. They didn't have their wife ready to come downstairs.
There wasn't enough toilet paper in the world.
Enough toilet paper. So I had them at 5-12. I'm happy to be wrong, and hopefully I am wrong. Hopefully they don't go 2-12 for the rest of the regular season. So we'll see.
I don't think anyone in your defense had them that I was aware of, more than maybe 8 or 9 wins.
Right.
I think what has been the biggest surprise for you, this season so far, besides the record within the game, is it? And let's even take Sam Darnold aside because he's kind of the linchpin. There's been a lot of surprises. Right. You can answer Sam Darnold. I'm not saying you can't, but
right. He's the obvious one.
Yeah, he's the obvious one. But in some ways, that's because of a number of other things.
Right.
So, what have been the
I would say the other surprise has been the Minnesota Vikings defense. And
definitely,
we all expected them to be better. They weren't going to be a bottom feeder in the league. My thought was they'll be 10 to 15, which still could happen throughout the year. But a lot of Sam Darnold's success is because the defense has been so darn good. You look at some of the touchdown passes he's thrown. Well, they picked off C.J. Stroud, second play of the game, and they were in scoring position right away. Oh, they scored a touchdown. They picked off Brock Purdy the week before, and all of a sudden the Vikings have the ball on the 49ers 10-yard line. So it's one play touchdown. So there have been so many situations this year where the reason why the offense has been so successful is because the defense has been so elite at making turnovers in optimal positions where the offense can go score.
And it doesn't seem like one guy.
Right.
It seems like the entire team, the system.
Right. And that's what I get also concerned about. It almost seems too perfect.
Yeah.
Right. The defense has been so good. The offense has been so good. Special teams been great. Our kicker just knocked in a 58-yard field goal that could have been good from 70 yards when you look at how high that ball was up on the goalpost. So it's eventually it's got to break down.
Yeah.
It's not going to be this.
We're not going 17-0 and busting.
Right.
Yeah.
There's going to be adversity. There's going to be concern at some point this season, and that's just been my warning to Vikings fans, because when you are a Vikings fan, and which I am, but I like to think of myself as an objective one that can see both sides of the story, you fall into the trap of thinking your team is the greatest team ever.
Yep.
And there's no crazier fan than NFL fans.
Yeah.
You look at some of the things that these guys wear, and they paint their face, and they buy Vikings, and they buy this gear, and they show up to these games looking like the head coach. It's crazy how much people invest into football games.
Yeah, and through 3 games, we might be the best team in the NFL, right?
Be.
Just on performance.
Right.
Just on performance, but I agree. And I was going to say, in addition to, your goofiness and authenticity, one of the things that I like, because I'm a very passionate, emotional guy. And
you are?
Yeah, did you notice?
No, I didn't.
Have you ever?
Okay.
Yep. Very passionate. Authentic also, but very passionate. And so I'm very, very careful with the Vikings.
Right.
I spent way too much of my life emotionally invested in the Vikings. And so one of the things that I personally like about your videos is you'll throw the hype out there and you'll talk about it and you'll enjoy it. But then it's right back to that skepticism. Hey, here's reality, okay? Right. Here's reality. And these are the ebbs and flows of, it wouldn't surprise me if we beat Green Bay, because this is the way I think about the NFL. Okay, you got You got running back Aaron Jones going back home, right?
Right.
Packers are hot, right? They're good, so they're not going to overlook them. They're still the favorites, so we're still getting dogged in this game, right?
Right.
Like, this is supposed to be a playoff team. This isn't a trap game. This is still, like, right on the edge of, like, let's see if the Vikings are really real for real,
right? Exactly.
And so, for me, I feel good about that because there's an energy there that's still that, hey, we got something to prove here. We're not buying into the hype. And there's a lot of other things that I like coming out of, out of the clubhouse, like Aaron Jones. What an addition. He might be the best addition of the offseason from an attitude standpoint, from a, like, just an energy standpoint. I've seen a few of his interviews. I'm like, this guy's awesome. Like, I would want to play with that guy. Like, he's so energetic. He's got gratitude. He's got the right focus. He's playing for the right reasons. He's not dogging Green Bay right now. He's saying how grateful he was for the opportunity, right? But deep down he wants to stick it to him. And I feel like the trap is going to be after Green Bay, right? Because then we'll probably have our bye, I think, after that.
We play in London after Green Bay against the Jets, and then it's our bye week.
Yeah, and see, I feel like that's, like, potentially, with the travel, coming off of the, if we win in Green Bay, right? The whole NFL is going to be whole NFL is going to be looking at Minnesota going,
team in the power
rankings, number one, maybe behind the Chiefs if they win, but we'll be 1 or 2, and the whole NFL is going to be, and I just see that's. Yeah, I know how the NFL works, right? And then
it's a momentum,
and then 2 losses later, what's wrong? We need to get J.J. McCarthy in there, So I love that you.
Has he lost it?
Yep, I love that you play both sides of that coin, and you know how to enjoy it, and you know how to kind of role play it into your podcast. And so for me, it's like, it's what I'm thinking, it's like, oh God, I'm so glad someone's being the voice of reason in here, for my own sanity, because I get way too excited, throughout the season.
It's hard not to.
It's hard not to. They suck you in. And you can see my wife just going, oh God, please just be bad this year. I can't handle my husband's mood swings.
Right, exactly. Well, and that's something that the Minnesota Vikings don't make or ruin my day anymore.
No.
Like when they lost to the Giants a couple years ago in the playoff game, I turned off the TV, went upstairs, and my day was whatever.
Yeah.
And that's just a part of my growing up. Yeah, exactly, right? So maybe you're still getting there.
No,
right?
I'm pretty good. I'm right where you. I think it took me a little longer than you did.
Yeah. I will say this though about you. You are so passionate, and you are so. But here's the thing. You like to ramble. But here's the thing. You're the most self-aware rambler I've ever witnessed, I think, in my entire life. Because ramblers don't know that they ramble.
Right.
Most of them. Like 99% of ramblers don't know that they ramble. But I have a quote from you in my little notebook when we went on the men's retreat a few years ago. And you wrote, I'm not one to ramble. And you looked around the room and had this big smile on your face like you knew that you ramble. And it was just so funny that...
everybody looked at me cross-eyed like,
and you're like,
is this guy serious?
I know I ramble. I know I talk. But it's so cool how self-aware you are of that. And it's not a bad thing to ramble either.
Yeah, it is and it isn't.
But it's fun to see how you have humor and self-awareness with that.
Yeah, man. It took me a long time to enjoy all my pros and cons,
Totally. As it does for all of us.
It does.
Right.
In my house, it's taking much less longer. It's so fun. It's so fun to have a home where I have 4, including myself, and the self-deprecation.
I was going to say, who's the other 2 kids?
Right. But, Brielle, God, what was it last night? She is getting so sharp and so witty, man. Yeah. I mean, she is getting so sharp and witty. She can tear me in half, like in the blink of an eye.
Go to your room.
But it's so funny.
Yeah.
And so having a home like that where there is such a level of self-awareness, and the one that's getting defensive is the one that's actually out of spiritual whack, right?
Yeah.
Because they're taking themselves too seriously at this point.
Right.
To be able to live in a home where we can identify that because we have so much fun, you know, making fun of ourselves and having and making fun of each other, but knowing where it comes from, you know, and it is unfortunately something that people do take too seriously, and I am very guilty of that in my younger years. I didn't know how to be self-aware like that,
Yeah,
but I appreciate that.
Yeah.
What is your prediction this weekend?
Well, I've predicted the Vikings lose every game this year, and so they're 3-0. But in my defense, the Vikings were underdogs against the Niners. They're underdogs against the Texans, both home games. They're field goal underdogs against the Packers. A lot of it is going to be dependent on whether or not Jordan Love plays for the Packers.
Do you think that's a plus or a minus? Because Willis is playing good.
He's been playing good, but Jordan Love is better than Malik Willis. But I'm not completely sold on Jordan Love as much as everybody else is. But with all that said, I think this is going to be the first game of the year that I predict the Vikings to win.
Okay.
Even though they're field goal underdogs, I think the Vikings are going to win 24-17.
And what is it? The defense that's giving you a little more of that?
We're getting some reinforcements back. Jordan Addison's back
that's
as wide
right.
receiver too. And I think it's just I'm not completely sold on Jordan Love as this top 5 quarterback
Agreed.
in the NFL. Week 1 against the Eagles, you know, the big story is that he hurt his knee. But a big story as well is that in week 1, he had like the second worst passer rating in the NFL. So like he was down there with like Caleb Williams from the Chicago Bears in terms of how he performed. Well, he hurts his knee on the last play of the game, and nobody's talking about how crap he performed. They're talking about, okay, when's he going to come back? How long is he going to be out? What's the injury? Did he tear his ACL? No one's talking about, oh, he threw like 1 touchdown and 3 picks against the, or whatever. I don't know exactly his stat line, but it wasn't good.
It wasn't good.
And
there's something to be said about kind of rookie quarterbacks. I'm not sure last year, was Jordan Love a rookie or was he a second year last year?
So last year was his first year starting. But he's been in the league for like 5 years.
Okay.
Because Aaron Rodgers is back for 3.
Right. And so there is something about that first year, you know, where you don't have the book on them. You know, you don't have time to adjust. It's a big step from, you see this with Dak Prescott all the time, who's been like, that's kind of who he reminds me of actually a little bit, where I'm on the same page as you. It's like,
up and down.
I need to see more. I need to see more, and I'm not sure, to be in that top 5, you have to be the guy who, regardless of how your team is playing, gets you the win. And I don't see that. I see the end of the season, the playoffs, I see a guy that caught fire, found the confidence in the wind at the right time in his first season, and it's like, okay, that's a high of all highs. That's a lot to live up to this season. Let's see, that's that momentum thing again, right?
Right.
Whereas there's something a little different with Darnold, because he's not doing that much. Like, that's the thing that makes me change my tune on that. You know, not to mention he's been in the league and he's played a lot, but he's not doing that much. He's doing what he needs to do, and he's done a couple of really, really good things that I didn't expect out of him. But the talent around that guy is insane. I mean, the 1-2 punch at running back, the wide receiving core might be the best in the league. We don't even have our stud tight end back. I mean, he doesn't have to do a ton. And so I feel like I could say the same thing about Darnold that I am about Love, and that's a very good possibility. I just feel a little different because
of the expectations.
Of the expectations, right. It's almost like they're trying to make Jordan Love into the top 5 quarterback, whereas, you know, Aaron Donald, no one has that, or, you know, has that expectation. It's like manage the most talented offensive team in the league on paper. Just manage it.
And you think about the system around you. And to take a comparison of like the NFL to like real life, just everyday life. The people around you matter. You think about what Sam Darnold dealt with the Jets and with the Panthers, and just garbage head coaches, guys that didn't really know how to get the best out of them, terrible systems, terrible management, ownership, all of the above. And you think about that in personal life. You think about who's around you, who's giving you the advice, who's holding you accountable, who's telling you just how awesome you are every single day, which isn't a good thing, depending on, it's not a bad thing.
If it's true.
If it's true. but even if it is true, you got to have the balance. Like, you're awesome, but like, you could also do this better too, right? You don't want to be told you're awesome every day, or that's going to go straight to the head and you're going to get a massive ego. But you also don't want to be told that you suck every day either. There's like this balance of holding each other accountable and like growing each other spiritually and psychologically, right? Just kind of like what we do. We have a lot of fun. We connect. We we tell each other and compliment each other on the work that we do, but it doesn't end there.
Right.
We're still holding each other accountable to what God's word says. Same thing with Sam Darnold and Kevin O'Connell. O'Connell's been a savior, theoretically, in his life, in terms of his football life and his football career. And now that he's under a good system and a good coach, well, things are looking brighter for him. And
there's so many factors.
Right. It's been so cool.
And you see that reflect within the obvious organization. So you have to factor those in. Like, look at the Justin Fields trade.
Right.
I mean, it's early, and who knows? Again, Justin Fields could flake out.
Totally.
But here he was in Chicago, which is a storied franchise, and it has a great history. But it also has a terrible history in terms of quarterback production, of overall success in general. It's not been great. And they just do a consistently terrible job. And then you send them to a top-tier organization like Pittsburgh, which would probably be in the conversation for top 3 organizations, period, across the entire NFL, with a consistent base like Tomlin and all of these coaches that have their roles, know what they're doing, know how to serve, know how to work together, have a obviously they have a higher goal, because same with Green Bay. I mean, you can be upset all you want as Minnesota fans. Just assume whoever they draft is going to be a stud quarterback.
For sure.
I mean, at what point in time do you
Malik
not...
Willis is another example.
Another example. The guy comes right in and tears it up.
Yeah, terrible with the Tennessee Titans. Couldn't get anything out of him. They ship him to Green Bay. Let's just get rid of this guy. He's no good. 2 weeks in a row, he puts up magnificent numbers.
And so you have to factor that in. Detroit was terrible forever. So it just goes to show you what a coach can do. And I do think O'Connell is growing. I think he really, really, man, it's hard not to get excited about all the individual pieces, from Flores to, O'Connell, to the defense, to the collective effort. It's tough not to. It's really going to be a fun season.
Yeah,
I think.
Totally.
It's already been a fun season.
This is the first time I predicted the Vikings to win.
Yeah.
And they're on the road against the Green Bay Packers. Like,
right.
That makes no sense.
And
because I'm buying in a little bit. I'm just like a little bit more.
I make it a point to know everyone in my life. And so I know all the people. So today I was at Speedway, and the manager was there, and he's a huge Green Bay fan. Okay, and I had a Green Bay jersey that I was trying to give away. I came up, I saw him in his car one day, and his whole inside is Green Bay Packers, and he's, he didn't want, I offered him the jersey because I didn't know what to do with it other than burn it, and he was working today, and I had my Bridgewater shirt, awesome. And I walked in, I'm like, let's get this rivalry going early, baby, and he's like, he just started grinning from ear to ear, and he goes, I'm kind of scared of the Vikings. I'm like, you should be scared of the Vikings right now. I don't know any Green Bay Packers fans that truly feel like they're the favorite in this game. And so it'll be interesting. It'll be really fun. And what a crazy division. Yeah. Like, seriously.
Yeah, it's crazy how the best divisions swap so quickly.
So quick.
Just a few years ago, you look at the Vikings division, like, well, the Lions aren't good, the Bears still stink. The Vikings are pretty solid with Kirk Cousins, and the Packers got Aaron Rodgers, but that's not the best division in football. The best division in football was Seahawks with Russell Wilson in his prime. The 49ers coming out of nowhere with like Alex Smith and all those boys. The Rams are looking good, and the Arizona Cardinals are. The division swaps so quickly in the NFL, and now it's the NFC North's turn. So it's and even like the what are they, the NFC South?
Yeah.
I think with
because
like
you have
Buccaneers and the
Saints, the Falcons.
Right.
I mean, they're
at that division as the worst division of football.
Right.
Falcons are going to walk to the playoffs. And I thought the same thing. I thought, well, it makes sense for Kirk to go to Atlanta because the Saints stink. The Bucs, they made it to the playoffs last year, but are they going to do that again?
Kind of.
Mayfield, really? Yeah, right.
They kind of made it.
They fell into a playoff spot, and the Carolina Panthers are the bottom feeder in the league.
Well, that much is true.
Well, we got that one.
That one is true.
Yeah, but it's just crazy how it transpires.
So, 2 questions. Where do you want to go with this? Like, if, again, I know you're a man of faith, and so the right answer is where God wants it to go. Mm-hmm. But if you can dream just as Tim, and what gets you excited regarding this part of your life and what you might want it, what you would enjoy it to be at some point, more than what it is right now. And then where does your faith and that intermingle with this part of your life, which I know is a question you've asked PA a few times.
Right, well, that's a big part of it. To answer question number 2, it's like when I get guys that come on my podcast to talk about football, and I know that they're believers, like a Paul Allen, like a Dalton Reisner, well, that's going to be my first question out of the gate. My first question isn't going to be, what's it like to be the play-by-play of the Vikings, or what's it like for Sam Darnold? What are your thoughts on him doing whatever? The first question is going to be, how has Jesus impacted your life? Because people are coming to the podcast, they're waiting to hear the Sam Darnold opinion. They're coming more than ever to the Minnesota Tim podcast because these guys are on. And the first answer that they're going to get is going to be about Jesus. And you're going to hear certain language from me during the podcast that reflects the way that Jesus wants me to live. And there's times where I let an ASS slip or a DAMN slip, but it's never going to be a focal point of what I'm saying. You'll hear that maybe once a month.
And it's just not who you are.
I'm not going to be swearing up a storm. I'm not going to lose my cool. And to answer your first question on like the goals, something that I learned, and it sounds so cliche, but at the same time, it's one of those things that when you're in the midst of it, you don't really know just how valuable it is, and it's enjoying the process. And it's one of the biggest cliches of all time.
Yeah,
but back when I was part-time at Sirius and full-time at Jimmy John's, and then all of a sudden you're full-time at Sirius XM and you're not even it's part-time at Jimmy John's, just working a Saturday. And how those schedules completely flipped and changed on their head. And I didn't fully just enjoy the process of going through it and understanding every single thing that I was learning in that moment because my eyes were so focused on that next thing.
Yeah.
And right now, it's tough to enjoy the process because again, my eyes are somewhat focused on growing the podcast and getting to the next thing. And the goal right now is to get 4,000 watch hours in like in 365 days because that's how you get monetized and that's how you can start making this thing into a profit. And that's how you can start getting money from the podcast. But at the same time, I'm also trying to enjoy like the everyday in and out grind of getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, posting these videos before my wife goes to work, and then I got to watch the kids on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and getting those social media pieces scheduled throughout the day so that I can do it. And there's so much fun in the grind. And you're gonna look back at one day and like wish that you had a project that you could work on. Like we all love projects, right? They're fun projects to grow this, grow that, grow that. But in the midst of the project, your eyes are so set on the next thing that you can't enjoy the project in the moment. So,
and I would say from a mindset coach, entrepreneurial standpoint, the most successful people in the world, by my definition, which is not just culturally and financially, but spiritually and from a joy-based equation, they all understand that. That's the exact equation they understand. You know, you look at the most popular podcaster in the world, Joe Rogan, right? He wrote the script on this. It's like, what did he do? Well, he did martial arts because that's what he loved. He didn't care about, you know, being the greatest martial artist in the world. He just, this is what's drawing me in. This is what I love. This is what I'm going to follow. Doesn't matter what anything else is. This is where, in some ways, whether he recognized it or not, this is what God is calling you to right now. So get on the path and follow this. And the next thing you know, it led to down the road being a commentator for MMA because he volunteered for it, because he loved that part so much. And, you know, and just his curiosity about everything. You know, you see this where he's not trying to make it anything. You know, you're not trying to make it anything, because I've found that that's the most limiting principle you can possibly have with Seek First. I meet with my coaches on a weekly basis, and I check on where they're at. If I hired these coaches to just do this, this, and this, then it wouldn't be what God wants his coaching business to be. I'm going to have a community of people helping people. Well, that could be, we need help with our business. Hey, I got a guy for that, right? It's like, hey, I need help in my marriage. Hey, I got a guy for that. You know, I mean, it's just a community of multiple talents. And so every time I meet with them, I'm like, I remind them, this isn't for me. This is for you. This is your community. I don't know what it is. The second I incorporate this, say this much is mine, this is here, boom, 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 and I start painting it as what it is, I limit what it could be. And it's been very clear to me in this part of my life that this isn't mine, this is his.
Right.
And so my job is to steward that and make sure that it's on the path it needs to be, and the people around it serving it are on that, and they understand that. And we're not gonna, anyone who's gonna come in here and push it to be something else, it's not gonna go very well.
Totally.
And that's the one way I know I can screw this up. And so I think that's extremely wise, and there is so much joy to the process, like this, like just this, this right here. I'm like, yeah, just hang out, talk to my friend, support your business. How can we support it, by the way?
You can go to YouTube and search for a Minnesota Vikings podcast by Minnesota Tim, and then hit that subscribe button.
Yeah.
Or you can listen to it on Apple or Spotify or iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts.
Cool. Any last little nuggets or tidbits or anything like that?
Nothing that I can necessarily think of unless you want to know anything more.
No, I think that's a good time. I mean, we can keep it a little shorter. That was awesome. We covered a lot of good stuff. I highly encourage you guys. Hopefully this gathers up a little wider audience, because it is so topical and people love hearing about their Vikings right now. And we're killing it, so why not? We might as well relish in it. This guy is an awesome voice. You have to, I think, the way you approach it is humble. You're sitting in your basement with a microphone, you know, with the clothes you rolled out of bed in.
Exactly.
I know. So I love that aspect of it as well. But
this is what I typically wear.
That's what you typically wear. But it's not just that charm, and it's not just that authenticity. It's good stuff, and it's clear you know what you're talking about, and you're so passionate about it, and it's fun. And your buddy comes on there often. I don't shaved head dude. And he's really great too. And so yeah. A Minnesota Vikings podcast with Minnesota Tim on YouTube. They're very palatable. You don't overwhelm us with, 30-minute podcast, clips. They're usually what? 5 to
10 minutes.
8 minutes, which is great. It's just to the point. And so, yeah, good luck.
That's the point, and that's why you do it.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want any fluff. Let's just get to the point. One of my things with podcasting that I learned is like, you don't need a long intro. You don't need a 45 second, third minute, and people are just going to fast forward anyways because they got a little 30-second fast forward button right there. You know what
That's
I mean?
right.
So let's just get through this bulk crap of whatever and get to the point that everyone wants to hear about.
All right. Well, thank you again, my friend.
Thank
I
you,
hope
man.
you have an awesome day.
Appreciate you.
And say hi to the fam. And,
Yeah, will do.
Enjoy and go let's get that guy to monetize.
Hey!